I don't have a gavel, and I will hereby welcome everyone to the first meeting of the Senate Committee on Education for the 81st session of the Nevada Legislature. Welcome to those both present online and by phone. Would the committee secretary please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Dondera-Loop.
Here.
Senator Hardy.
Here.
Senator Hammond.
Here.
Senator Lange.
Here.
Senator Buck.
Here.
Chair Dennis.
I'm here. Thank you very much. And I guess it's a new day for us in the Education Committee, as well as all the other committees doing this, with the pandemic and having to do things online. So we're grateful to be with you today, and we hope that you'll forgive us if everything doesn't go exactly right. There's a lot of technology that's going on in the background here to help us do this, and hopefully we've got it right, and we want to make sure that we're able to hear from everybody that wants to speak. We're going to have some presentations today. We're going to have some bills, and we'll have some public comments. So hopefully we'll be able to hear all of that, and so we'll go from there. Before we begin, I'd like to explain how virtual committee meetings will work, since this is a new process for all of us. As you know, the legislative building is currently closed to the public, so all committee meetings will be held virtually, meaning committee members, staff, and everyone else will participate either through Zoom video conference or by telephone. However, there are various ways members of the public can engage with us and participate through the process. There are 4 ways to engage with the committee. These include registering to participate in a committee meeting through a new system on Nellis, which places you in line to testify on a bill or provide public comment during the meeting. Submitting written testimony to the committee email address or fax number listed on the agenda. Sharing your opinion via the legislature's opinion application on Nellis, or viewing committee meetings online through Nellis or on the legislature's YouTube channel. And that's something new this time, I believe, that we're doing the YouTube channel, so that's one additional place that you can watch the committees during the session. During the 2021 legislative session, to testify on a bill or provide public comment, members of the public must first register for the meeting you would like to participate in. Just a note here, if you are doing on the public comment, you'll when we get to that, you call in and you'll use a phone to come in, and you'll just identify yourself as you give those comments. So committee meetings are listed in several places on Nellis, and to register, simply click the participate button near the meeting date and time, then fill in the required information such as your name, the agenda item you're interested in, and your position on the bill. Once your registration is submitted, you will see a confirmation screen, and you will also receive an email with the phone number and meeting ID to call at the time of the meeting. Just a note that while meeting registration is required to participate, it does not guarantee you'll be able to speak. Similar to previous sessions, testimony and public comment may be limited due to time constraints. When you're on the phone line, please pay attention to which bill is being considered and follow the verbal prompts provided by Broadcast and Production Services staff, so that you know which keys to press to raise your hand or unmute yourself. Staff will call on you to speak by the last 3 digits of your phone number. Detailed instructions for participating in committee meetings are also available on the help page, which is linked in the banner at the top of every page on Nellis. If you need assistance with any of these procedures, or if you would like to receive electronic notification of the committee's agendas and minutes, please contact our committee manager at the committee email listed on the agenda. Some other items I want to mention before we get started is to please mute your microphones when not speaking for those on the video line. And I will open up the public comment period at the end of the meeting. I will also take testimony in support, opposition, or neutral for the bills on today's agenda. Public comment and testimony on bills are limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Before we begin with the rest of today's agenda, I would like to kick off, because this is our first meeting, our session together, by taking a moment for committee and staff introductions. I'd like to briefly introduce our staff before giving committee members an opportunity to introduce themselves. And just as a heads up for the senators, when you introduce yourself, I'll call on you, and then please include the Senate district you represent and your educational background. Share, and just as a fun thing to do, share where you went to kindergarten and a favorite memory that you have from kindergarten. I asked our staff to provide me with a few words about them and a fun fact. Perhaps members of the committee can do the same during their introductions. So one, our committee policy analyst, once again, is Jen Sturm, who has been with the Research Division of the Legislative Council Bureau since 2016. She staffed the Legislative Committee on Education for the last 2 interims and is staffing the Senate Committee on Education for the 2nd session in a row. She was born and raised right here in Carson City and graduated with both her bachelor's and master's degrees from University of Nevada, Reno. Before her time in state service, she studied and lived in France and worked in Vienna, Austria, for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, an organization under the United Nations Charter. One interesting fact about Jen is that this time last year, she was literally chilling with the penguins when she traveled to Antarctica. In addition to her passion for traveling, she also plays the French horn for local groups in her spare time. So, and you might see her as we go. I don't know, can we get a picture of Jen on the screen or no?
Hey everyone, happy to be here and working with y'all.
All right. Thank you, Jen. Number 2, Asher Killian is our committee counsel this session. He has been an attorney for the legal division of the LCB for 14 years. Mr. Killian has provided legal counsel to education committees for the legislature in previous sessions. He is happy to be returning to Senate Education after serving the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs last session. He also staffed various interim committees on issues relating to education, healthcare, affordable housing, cannabis, and redistricting. An interesting fact about Asher is that shortly after he came to the LCB from Oklahoma, he learned that he was a bone marrow match for an anonymous patient fighting leukemia and took a brief leave to donate peripheral blood stem cells for transplant. The transplant was successful and the recipient's leukemia went into remission. The opportunity to save a stranger's life remains one of his most cherished experiences. And Asher, I think I see you there. You want to just say hi real quick?
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be back with the Senate Education Committee.
And we're excited to have you with us. Our committee manager is Shane Harris. So he's new to our to the Education Committee this time. If you will be testifying or closely following the committee this session, you want to reach out to him and ask to be on his email distribution list. Shane was born and raised in Sparks and is a graduate of UNR with a Bachelor's of Arts in History. After graduation, he moved to Guangzhou, China, to work as an independent historian and educational consultant for Chinese education companies and schools. Shane created a tour and cultural competency company, giving tours to consulates, businesses, and tourists. He is proud to have worked with the U.S. Department of State on its social media and outreach campaign in 2019 in celebration of the 40th anniversary of relations between U.S. and the People's Republic of China. Shane is passionate about public service and is currently applying to American University for a master's in intercultural communication. Shane is an avid singer, dancer, world traveler, researcher, tea drinker, musical theater devotee, and loves corgis. Our committee secretary, let's see, can we see Shane? Shane's there. You want to say hi real quick?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here.
Good to have you. Our committee secretaries this session are Ian Goner and Michael Gus, and they will be alternating between. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to see them, but Ian was born in Bellevue, Washington, and moved to Washoe County when his parents managed the Microsoft data center building in Reno. He has lived in the area for over 20 years. Ian graduated from UNR in 2013 with a bachelor's in history. His passion for education and teaching led him to education administration for the past 6 years, working in a registrar's department of charter and Carrington colleges. While working for Charter College, Ian directly contributed to Charter's successful reaccreditation and revolutionized the faculty database to an electronic format. He later worked for Carrington College as Registrar Operations Specialist, where he trained multiple campus leaders and faculty on policy and procedure. Ian has a passion for early 20th century history, film history, science fiction, and all things Disney. Ian has 2 cats named Eve and Mike Wazowski, and he is a founding member of the Northern Nevada X-Wing Gaming Group and Ejects Rejects Movie Review Podcast. I don't know. Can we see Ian? Maybe not. Probably because he's, oh, there. No. Ian's in the one probably that says 2134, right? Yeah. Okay. So we won't be able to see him, but we will in the future. All right. Michael has a background in economic development planning and grant writing. He has worked for the Western Nevada Development District, North Central Washington Economic Development District, the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe, and as a congressional aide. Michael co-wrote the 2012 Economic Blueprint for Western Nevada, assisted with the passage of the Lyon County Conservation and Economic Development Act, and oversaw an economic recovery planning process after a wildfire in Okanogan County, Washington. He has written successful grants to establish computing centers, install electric vehicle charging stations, establish alternative loan funds, and expand broadband networks in Nevada and Washington state. Michael holds a Master of Public Administration degree from the University of Baltimore and a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Pittsburgh. I think he's probably in that same 2134. Finally, Syria Sosa has been my legislative assistant for 2 consecutive sessions. Syria was born and raised in Mexico, where she started her college education. She attained a master's degree from the University of Phoenix, Las Vegas campus. Syria is proud mother of 2 sons, Cesar and Alexis Perez, now married, and is loving grandmother to her 2.5 grandbabies, one expected in March. She retired from state service after working for LCB from 1994 to 2013. During her employment, Syria met and worked for Senator Joe Neal, who became her mentor and best friend. She is proud to have worked with other great legislators. Syria was selected to work for the LCB from among 100 applicants. At first, she thought she applied to a law office until she received the offer to take the job. It's nice to have such a wonderful, so Syria, I don't know if we can see Syria. Oh, there she is.
Thank you, Senator. It's an honor to be back working for you and the Senate Committee on Education. Appreciate it.
I'm excited to have you back. It's nice to have such a wonderful eclectic group. Thank you, all of you in advance for all the hard work you're going to do this session. And on top of all of that, all of this extra stuff that we have to do because of the doing it online and virtually. Now I'd like to recognize members of the committee to make their own introductions or comments. Once again, Senate District, you present your educational, what you've done in education. Share where you went to kindergarten and your favorite fun memory from kindergarten. I will go ahead and begin, and the others can follow. I'm Senator Mo Dennis, representing Clark County Senate District number 2, which is downtown Las Vegas and downtown North Las Vegas. I've been on the Senate Education Committee in 2011, 2015, 2017, 2019. I was also on the Assembly Education Committee in 2007, 2009. I am not a teacher or an administrator. I'm actually a dad of 5 kids, but I am the husband of a first grade teacher and the father of a middle school social studies teacher. And I am a former president of the Nevada Parent Teacher Association, got involved in education advocacy to help my kids and realized we needed to help all our kids. And so that's how I got involved in education and policy. I actually went to kindergarten, and I don't know the name of the school, but I went to kindergarten in Arlington, Virginia. My favorite memory from kindergarten was milk and cookies. The other part that I remember is I didn't quite speak English yet when I was in kindergarten, so I was learning English. It was a little frustrating that year for me, but and I didn't get to finish kindergarten because we actually moved halfway through the year. So I only got half a year of kindergarten, so that could be the reason for a lot of things. But anyways, the rest of the time I was in Las Vegas. So now let's go to Vice Chair Dondero Loop. Let me introduce her first. Vice Chair Dondero Loop is on Senate Education this year, and also she was on Assembly Education in 2009, 2011, 2013, and last year, or the last session she was on Senate Ed. So with that, Senator Loop.
Thank you so much. Chair, can you hear me? Okay. Okay.
Yes, you're good. Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to serve as your vice chair. I served with Senate District 8 And that is on the west end of town. Piccoli Ranch, Lakes, some of Summerlin is the general area, downtown Summerlin. And my educational background is that I spent 30 years as an educator. I received my education and my master's degrees, 2 of them from UNLV. I went to kindergarten at a school that no longer exists. It was called Mayfair Elementary, and it was sort of off the corner of 15th and Charleston. It became a fire department training area, and we all moved over to John S. Park. So my favorite memory was that I actually had Laura Deering as a teacher, and then I started my career as a teacher at Laura Deering Elementary School. So I come from a family that gave back to the community. My father was an educator, and my mother was very involved. And so I'm hoping to continue that legacy, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to Senator Hardy. Senator Hardy served in the Assembly Education 2003, 2005, 2007, 2009, and we welcome him to the Senate Education this time. Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Joe Hardy, Senate District 12. I was a freshman at UNR. My mother was a professor and my dad was a sophomore. And and before that I went to kindergarten, and the interesting fact at Mary S. Stoughton Kindergarten grade school, which is now a parking lot, was that I couldn't figure out the difference between red and green. I could figure out they were different, but I didn't know which one was which. My aunt gave me a doll with red hair, and I named it Reddy. And whenever the teacher asked me my colors, if it was the same color as Reddy's hair, then I knew it was red, and otherwise it was green. And so that was a very valuable lesson I learned in kindergarten. And I've been through a few colleges, and now I'm an associate professor at Truro University College of Osteopathic Medicine and the associate dean of clinical education. And so I have lived and breathed and been around a family that has been invested in education. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hardy, and it's good to be back on education with you again. Senator Hammond served on Senate Education in 2015, 2017, 2019. Senator, and we welcome him once again this time. So, Senator Hammond.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. It's good to be back. I represent District 18 in the Las Vegas area, otherwise known as the Centennial Hills area. It's up there, I guess, in the northwest corner. I have my educational background. I have a bachelor's degree in political science. I have a master's in political science from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And then kindergarten, I think I started off kindergarten in New York in the Syracuse area, but then we traveled back to, my stepfather was stationed at Fort Lewis, and I went to a school there in Fort Lewis for the remainder of kindergarten. I just remember, I remember the sandbox that we used to play in, but my real clear memory of kindergarten was my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Audie. She had the the beehive hairdo, the horn rim glasses, and she scared the dickens out of me. I just remember I didn't have a pleasant time with Mrs. Audie that kindergarten year, and I kind of wanted to get out of kindergarten, couldn't wait to get out of kindergarten. I remember first grade, you'd go to back in those days, you'd go to your door, your first grade class, so you look on all the first grade class doors to see where your name was, and that'll tell you who your teacher was. And I remember seeing my name on first grade, and I saw my name on the list, and then I looked up to see who my teacher was, and it was Mrs. Audie. She had changed from kindergarten to first grade, and I had her for 2 years in a row. That's my brief memory of kindergarten, and probably my favorite one because it still sticks to me. It sticks with me all these years later.
Thank you, Senator Hammond. That explains a lot.
I don't know what it explains, but you have to tell me.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. The next two senators are new to the legislature, but not new to education. We will have Senator Lang, if she would introduce herself.
Thank you, Chairman Dennis. Hi, I am State Senator Roberta Lang. I represent District 7 in Las Vegas, and that would be everything from UNLV and East. I am a K-12 teacher. I taught physical education. I have my bachelor's in physical education, a minor in Bible, and a minor in education. I came into my school district as a group when physical education came to elementary schools, and I helped develop the program for the elementary schools. I later went on to be the president of my teachers union, where I served as not only president but chief negotiator for the teachers contract. During my time as a teacher, I had the great opportunity of lobbying our members of Congress on educational issues and also lobbying the Washington state legislature. I am so happy to be on this committee and to advocate issues that are so important to our children. Kindergarten was a long time ago for me. It's hard to remember back, but I think the thing I remember the most, I loved art in elementary school, and I remember, I don't even know if they do this now, but we made plaster of Paris round things where we put our hands in it, and we had our kindergarten handprint, and that's the thing I remember the most.
Thank you. I remember that. I don't know if they do it now, but I remember that.
Oh, good. I don't feel alone.
Great. Thank you, Senator Lang. Now, Senator Buck, would you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chair Dennis. I am honored to represent State Senate District 5 in Henderson and South Las Vegas. I have a bachelor's in elementary education, became a teacher, moved to Las Vegas because they were hiring teachers, and I was so excited to get my own classroom. Then I went right back to school 4 months later because I soon realized that the culture of a school is really indicative of the principal, and I received my master's in administration and supervision, became a principal, wanted to create this utopia of a school, CT school, and was principal there for nearly 9 years. Turned that to National Title I school, then moved and worked on my educational doctorate, received that in 2006, and became executive director of Pinecrest Academy. We grew that to 6 schools, one of the top charter schools in the state, and now I am president of the Pinecrest Foundation. I also just finished the USC Superintendent's Academy and District Administration Superintendent's Academy, and just completed the School Finance Certificate from Georgetown McCourt School of Public Policy. I also taught and created curriculum for the ELO programs and for new teachers at Sierra Nevada, Nevada State College, and University of Phoenix. I currently teach at a master's and doctoral program for Touro University. Kindergarten. I went to kindergarten in Hinton, Iowa in 1976, and there were 950 people populous of Hinton, Iowa. So it was a small farming community. And I graduated with the same 50 kids that I went to kindergarten with. As far as my favorite kindergarten memory, I would have to say my kindergarten teacher. I had the exact opposite experience than Senator Hammond. I love my kindergarten teacher, and she actually, just watching her, I knew from a young age I wanted to be an educator, a teacher. And so I just see how much teachers make such a difference for each kid in front of them. And so I'm grateful to serve, and thank you, Chair Dennis.
Thank you very much. That's as you can tell, we have a lot of great experience in our committee this time. And I will mention that we will have a new member of our committee on Monday, and we'll get an opportunity to meet him when he's here with us. I'd like to now go to, for the next order of business, to review and approve the committee rules. You should have a copy, and the document is also available on Nellis. Any questions first? I'm going to highlight a couple things, but there's nothing initial. Couple things here I want to point out. I ask that members attend all meetings from the time the meeting begins till the meeting is adjourned. unless you're excused in advance. Just let me know, especially as we get, when we get really busy, you might have to go present a bill and do some other, we got other things. Just let me know what's going on, because especially if we're voting on things, I want to make sure that everybody's here so they have that opportunity. Also want to emphasize the importance of courtesy, mutual respect in our dealings with one another. We may not always agree, but I ask that everyone, members, staff, stakeholders, make every effort to be kind and professional. And finally, as legislators, we are public servants of the public. We are servants of the public. We take this duty seriously and are honored to serve in this capacity. And I will do everything in my power to ensure a fair hearing for all parties on all bills heard by this committee. So questions? Is there any questions on committee rules? If not, I will gladly take a motion to adopt the committee rules.
So moved.
Okay, we had two there. Let's see. Senator Lang, I'll let you make the motion. Senator Hammond seconds. Further discussion? All right, we will now have is it Miss Sturm that's going to do the roll call votes, or the secretary?
Mr. Chair, Jen Sturm for the record. I think our committee secretary will do that.
Okay, so if we could have this committee secretary take the roll call vote. Oh, and also because it's difficult to distinguish between yay and nay, if you'll just say yes or no, that makes it easier.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. Senator Dundara-Loop.
Here, yes, I'm sorry.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Hammond.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Here, yes.
Senator Buck.
Yes.
Chair Dennis.
Yes, thank you. I know it's hard for those of us that have been here a long time to say yay and nay is something you just always do. Some of us that had interim finance, we had to start doing that months ago, so we've gotten a little used to it. But it's hard to say yes and actually to do our voting that way. Normally, I would have just done a voice vote and we would have been done. But it's harder to tell when we're online like this. Okay, so that was committee rules. Our next item on the agenda, I've asked our policy analyst to provide a quick overview of our committee brief. This is a tool to help us prepare and execute our duties as members of the committee. Ms. Sturm, go ahead, begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Jen Sturm, Senate Education Policy Analyst. As nonpartisan legislative staff, I neither support nor oppose any legislation. Chair Dennis has asked me to give an overview of the committee brief, which each of you should have a copy of. It is also available online for others to look at as well. So just quickly going through this starting on page 1 of the brief, you'll note the committee's jurisdiction. Except for the education finance chapter, the statutory jurisdiction in recent sessions has included most of Title 34 of NRS, several chapters in Title 33 concerning libraries. As noted on page 2, during the 2019 session, this committee considered a total of 81 measures, and a similar number are expected in 2021. Of those, 66 measures, or 81%, were voted out of the committee, and 53 measures, or 65%, were approved by the legislature and signed by the governor. And so the chart on page 2 breaks this down for you. With a similar number of bills expected this session, you should anticipate hearing an average of about 3 bills at each meeting before the April 9th first House committee deadline. On pages 2 and 3 for your review, I also listed a number of major bills passed during the 2019 regular session and the 31st special session in 2020. In addition to the appropriations bills, so Senate Bill 555 from 2019 and Assembly Bill 3 from 2020, I'll especially note some legislation that addressed school safety and student well-being measures. including reporting on information related to suicide and suicide prevention, including procedures for responding to a suicide crisis or emergency, conducting an interim study on safe and respectful learning environments, and establishing the Handle with Care program. Several other school safety and student well-being measures were passed through SB 89, which passed unanimously in both houses. Among other things, the bill established a statewide school safety committee, required school climate information and reporting, addressed restorative discipline practices, and required districts and charter schools to designate a school safety specialist. Other bills address topics related to class size and the statewide teacher performance evaluation system. Another bill many of you may remember is SB 543, which replaces the current Nevada plan funding formula and the majority of categorical funding for K-12 with the new pupil-centered funding plan. It also established the Commission on School Funding to support its implementation. I'll be providing a quick overview of that commission's recommendations over the interim a little bit later. This is not meant to be an all-inclusive list, but if any members would like more information on these bills, I can certainly provide those more detailed summaries to you. So on page 4, I've listed some national education topics. We do have representatives joining us today from Education Commission of the States who will further expand on these topics. During the interim, several education groups met on a wide range of topics, some of which may come before the committee. So I was going to briefly go over some of those as well. I'll start with the Interim Legislative Committee on Education, or the LCE. This committee considered a number of topics related to K-12 and post-secondary education. The LCE received presentations on a variety of topics, as you can see, starting on page 5 and onto page 6. The committee reviewed topics ranging from early learning programs to student assessments to career pathways to financial aid for higher education programs. The LCE approved 6 proposals for legislation on topics including student assessments, charter schools, school buses, and others. 18 proposals were approved for correspondence on issues or inclusion in position statements. More details of the actions of the LCE can be found in its final bulletin, which I've also linked to in the electronic version on page 6 of the brief. Next is the Commission on School Funding. As I mentioned earlier, the implementation of SB 543 has been guided by the Commission. In July of 2020, the Commission submitted its recommendations to the Governor and the Legislature to provide input on how best to support the successful implementation of the People-Centered Funding Plan. The Commission has an ongoing role in monitoring the implementation of the new funding plan and make recommendations for its improvement. I'd like to turn your attention then to the Commission's recommendations that I summarized on page 6. These recommendations can largely be organized into 3 general categories. As you can see, revisions to the model, implementation, and reporting requirements. In that first category, the recommendations are to include the district size adjustment by attendance area to replace the small district equity adjustment and the necessarily small school adjustment, adopt an alternative measure for at-risk pupils, which is currently defined as children who are eligible for free and reduced price lunch, and remove the state's maintenance of effort requirement for special education from the new funding plan and transfer the maintenance of effort and federal funding for special education to a separate account within the state education fund. The next category, implementation, some of those recommendations include expanding the hold harmless provision included in SB 543 to include charter schools and university schools for profoundly gifted pupils. Clarifying that the school district ending fund balance is the unrestricted general fund balance for the school district, excluding the net proceeds of minerals, and assuring future funding bills include the ability for the Department of Education to request a supplemental appropriation if needed until the Education Stabilization Account has sufficient funding to meet any revenue shortfalls or unexpected increases in enrollment. And the final category deals with reporting requirements. And the recommendations are to consider flexibility in statutory reporting timeframes and deadlines, consolidate reports collected from the school districts and the charter school authority regarding staffing data, and eliminate reporting at the subcategory level regarding service area. And finally, modify reporting of professional development to identify both the amount and the source of funding by the district annually. The next group that worked this interim was the working group studying provisions related to a safe and respectful learning environment. This SB 332 of 2019 required the LCE to study safe and respectful learning environments in consultation with various stakeholders. Due to the interruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, staff of the LCB was directed to work with relevant stakeholders on this review, gather information, and report those findings to the LCE. And the final report is also linked in the electronic version on page 7. And going on to the middle part of page 7 now, the Teacher Recruitment and Retention Advisory Task Force also met and provided several recommendations to the LCE, including topics related to recruitment to the teaching profession, the path from recruitment to employment, and retention matters. And in fact, one recommendation offered by the task force was voted on as a BDR by the LCE, and it directs the Department of Education to develop, implement, and analyze the results of the statewide educator exit survey. And I'm always happy to provide any of these final reports to members who would like a copy of that. Now, towards the bottom of page 7, I also provided a quick review of the bill draft requests available on Nellis, as well as the governor's State of the State address, and identified a few common themes you may see this session, so you can look that over. And then moving on to page 8, our list of the committee's pre-filed bills, a couple of which we are hearing today. In every session, the legislature requires several reports to be submitted. Pages 8 and 9 of the brief list some of those reports that may be of interest to the committee, including the Superintendent of Public Instruction's annual report of the state of public education, the Education Technology Needs Assessment, the Regional Training Programs Evaluation, and the Advisory Council for Family Engagement Activities. And then on page 9, you'll note that the research division does prepare research briefs and other publications for all major policy areas. These publications are available on the legislature's website. Additional publications concerning education are also available from the Fiscal Analysis Division. Pages 9 and 10, I've listed a few key policy bodies that consider education in the state, just for your information there. And then finally, pages 11 and 12 list some common acronyms used by the committee. I know that in education, we do use a lot of acronyms, so that might be a helpful cheat sheet. And so with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to pull additional information on anything discussed today. And just a reminder, as your nonpartisan staff, we're here to support you. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions or want additional information.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions? It's a great resource. You can look through there and see all the work that's been done and all the folks that are doing work in this space. And probably the most important thing on here is the acronyms. I remember when I first came on, there was a lot of acronyms. Even though some of these, there's just a lot of different acronyms associated with education. So thank you very much. All right, so next I would like to invite Zeke Perez with the Education Commission of the States to present on some of the educational topics we are seeing nationally right now. So Zeke, thank you for joining us today, and please begin when you are ready.
Great. Let me see. Thank you, Chair Dennis, and thanks to the Education Committee for inviting us here today to share with you all about what we're seeing around the country. My name is Joel Moore, and I'm part of the State Relations team with Education Commission of the States. On a personal note, kindergarten was Clinton Park Elementary in Clinton, Mississippi, and I am still mildly traumatized by being forced to eat green eggs and ham. But so for those of you who may not be familiar, Education Commission of the States is a national nonpartisan education policy center created in law in all 50 state statutes with the purpose of helping education policy leaders from around the country, whether it's governor's offices, state departments of education, boards of education and higher education, legislators and their staffs, because we know that more informed policymakers create better education policy. And so what we do, our policy team creates releases 6 to 8 policy briefs and 50 state comparisons each month. These are all available for free and searchable for you on our website at ecs.org. We also track all introduced legislation, education legislation from around the country. It was about 7,000 bills this past year, and summarize all of the enacted and vetoed education legislation and executive orders. And we share that information with you through our state bill tracking site. If there's something that's related to state education policy on which we don't have prepared information, we are here and happy to help look into that through what we call an information request. We're usually able to get a written response back to you in about 72 hours on those. So always feel free to reach out to me directly or to your committee staff. They're also happy to make that connection. So today, my colleague Zeke Perez, who's a policy analyst with the ECS team, will give you all a high-level overview of the policy trends he's seeing around the country. And it's a lot of information. So we've prepared a list of ECS resources on these topics that's been distributed to you all. But if there's something specific you'd like to learn more about, please do let us know and we'll get that information to you as soon as possible. So with all that in mind, it's my pleasure to hand the discussion over to Zeke.
Thank you, Joel. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your time and for the invitation to present today. I don't know that I have a fun kindergarten fact, but I'll throw out there I was the mascot for my college, and then I went on to be a professional mascot. So yeah, so I'll throw that out there as my fun introduction fact. As Joel mentioned, we'll be providing a high-level overview of a number of issues today. We won't go incredibly in depth on any given issue, but we will provide key approaches that states are taking. And we hope the broad look at trends is helpful. As Joel mentioned, we're happy to follow up with any additional information or specific state examples on any topic that you might need. We're going to roll through a lot of numbers. We're going to touch on a lot of issues, and we're going to move pretty fast. So we have some time at the end for Q&A, but no pressure, as Joel mentioned. If you do have other questions that come up in the coming weeks or throughout the legislative session, we're here as a resource for you, and we're happy to connect. So I'll begin by saying that we have dozens of ECS staff members who are tracking over 60 legislative issue areas. In 2020 alone, we tracked over 8,600 bills that were introduced on education issues across the US. And then we analyzed the over 900 bills that were either enacted or vetoed by governors. So the presentation we're going to give you today pulls some trending topics based on both the bill volume from bill tracking in 2020, excuse me, as well as early 2021 bill tracking, and as well as questions we've received from state leaders either late last year or early this year. So the numbers that I'll be rolling through in this presentation are purely the 2020 numbers, but we do project that those trends will carry into 2021. And the top 5 trends we identified based on those criteria are teaching, K-12 funding, post-second affordability and finance, student health and wellness, and high school issues. And I don't think any of you will be surprised to hear that we also saw a large number of bills that were introduced in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. But rather than talking about that as a separate issue in a separate section, we'll address COVID-19 efforts from states as a thread throughout each of the other issues we talk about. So to begin, we'll talk about teaching. And in 2020, we tracked over 1,400 introduced pieces of legislation that addressed the teaching profession. Of those, 166 were either eventually enacted or vetoed. And of those 166, we saw 28 that we determined to be directly related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So what do teaching bills typically address? The first trend we identified, or sub-trend we identified, is preparation and professional development for teachers. In recent years, we've seen that teachers are requesting more effective training experiences and support both pre-service and during their teaching service. Common themes that they're looking for include more collaborative, personalized, and relevant training, as well as different PD opportunities that can be offered in multiple formats. States are also offering content area specific PD. So for example, we've seen a number of states that are working on their P3 literacy systems and trying to build out comprehensive systems. And some states have approached this from a teaching angle by examining teacher prep and establishing new PD opportunities around literacy generally, or around the identification of dyslexia, so that teachers are better prepared to support all students in literacy. The next trend we identified is around teacher evaluations, specifically for the 2020-21 school year. We've seen a number of states, and we've received a number of questions from state leaders asking about how they are handling those evaluation requirements for this year. And we've seen a few approaches to the topic that have kind of come out across states. So we've seen a number of states either waive all of their requirements for evaluation. We've seen some states that waive certain requirements. And then we've seen some other states that have issued flexibility or guidance to local districts on how to handle those requirements. Additionally, we've seen other states or state boards of education that have amended their provisions so that during public health emergencies, teachers can maintain the previous year's evaluation ratings rather than having to be re-rated during that health emergency. And even still, we've seen other states that have approved proposals to suspend strict compliance with personal evaluation requirements this year to give local districts more control about administering those evaluations or about how to apply those to teachers going forward. And the final sub-trend we identified is around teacher recruitment and retention. So notably, we've seen a number of questions about teacher recruitment, particularly around creating a diverse teacher workforce. And we anticipate that that's a trend that will continue into 2021. A number of states have seen shortages of effective teachers, and they're not only concerned with getting more teachers, but they're concerned with getting more teachers in the right subjects, in the right schools. So states have looked at to address that by focusing on issue areas of teacher turnover or shortages in specific subject areas and providing supplemental help to teachers to draw them to those areas. In the wake of a pandemic, it can be challenging for states to focus on recruitment and retention, and so states are finding new ways to get creative with that. So notably, we've seen some states that are beginning to look at mid-career transitions, right? So typically, teacher recruitment efforts focus on individuals who are starting a teaching career. You do see some incentives such as loan forgivenesses or bonuses that are available to anyone pursuing teaching at different points in their career. But we're starting to see more states look to give attention to and create policies for career switchers. So individuals who might be working outside of education in a career in tech field, let's say, or in a specific field that's a shortage area. So states are opening up licensure and certification requirements to pull people in from other professions into the teaching profession. The next trend we identified, again, not a surprising one, is K-12 funding. We saw 684 bills related to K-12 finance and funding in 2020. 123 of those were ultimately enacted or vetoed, and 56 of those 123 were related to the pandemic. So as you know, states primarily draw revenue for public schools from state and local sources. So as economic situations change, pandemics happen, that puts a financial strain on how states might budget that money towards public education. And we've especially lately seen a lot of states that are looking to allocate various amounts to students with more need and trying to do so while funding volatility is happening. So what do K-12 finance bills typically do? Most times we see bills that look to change how funds are distributed at the state level and at the local level, how school funding formulas account for student populations like foster youth, students in special education, English language learners, or students from low-income families. So we've seen states lately put a priority on funding students with high needs student populations. There are a number of ways that states are doing that, including increasing or decreasing allocations for certain populations, or making adjustments to their funding formulas overall, or completely adopting new funding models for those populations. Additionally, in response to the pandemic, we saw that states are investigating how to better allocate funds to mitigate the uneven effects of the pandemic on disadvantaged schools. So states are identifying districts that may not have the cash reserves needed to provide staff development, to provide digital resources to go remote, technology to go remote, or other tools to facilitate the instruction needed during the COVID-19 pandemic. So states are adding supplemental income as possible for low wealth counties or communities as a remedy to that. Another challenge this year is attendance-based funding, right? How do you provide funding based on the number of students in a classroom when students in many cases aren't in a physical classroom to be counted? So states are really digging into that, and we've identified two main approaches that states have used or have introduced. Number one, states are looking at altering their funding policies to encompass other methods of instruction, such as in-person, hybrid, or remote. We saw a number of states that told districts that they should expect to receive the full allocation of funds depending or regardless of the attendance format that they used. So just increasing that flexibility to let states count students as needed. And the second main approach we've seen is states completely suspending or holding attendance and enrollment counts entirely for this year, opting to fund schools based on last year's accounts. As with any recession, ECS will be keeping an eye on these funding levels to see how long it'll take state budgets to return to pre-COVID levels. So we hope to be in touch this year with any impacts on school funding. Next up is post-secondary affordability and finance. And in this area, we saw a lot of overlap with K-12, right? How are states finding the means to, at the state or local level, to fund post-secondary institutions? But we also saw a number of different approaches to get creative with the pandemic as well. So in this issue area, again, more numbers for you, we saw 582 bills introduced. 82 of those were ultimately enacted or vetoed, and 31 of the 82 that were enacted or vetoed were related to the pandemic. One key area that we've seen states take part in is funding workforce development and helping people who are out of work either adapt to a new degree or a new field and get back into the workforce. So one way states are doing that is increasing funding or providing supplemental funding to their career and technical education institutions to provide retraining or recertification for individuals who are out of work due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We've also seen states explore ways to make post-secondary education more affordable to everyone and to reduce student debt. Some ways we've seen them do that include altering in-state tuition for specific student populations, such as military children, children of immigrants, or other student populations, in order to keep students in-state, keep students coming to those in-state post-secondary institutions. And finally, similar to K-12, we've seen states addressing their funding formulas or grants or other sources of funding to reallocate money towards post-secondary systems. Next up, student health and wellness. And this is an issue area we've seen increasing over the past few years as students continue to report high levels of stress, depression, and anxiety. Unfortunately, youth suicide rates continue to rise, and the effects of childhood trauma are showing up in classrooms across the country. So policymakers have begun to explore their role in bettering student health, mental health, and behavioral health in the classroom and seeing what they can do to impact that. Another big issue area, we saw 1,400 introduced pieces of legislation here. About 120 of those became enacted or vetoed in 2020, and then 21 of those were directly related to the pandemic. So some key issue areas here that we identified. First off is student mental and behavioral health. So we've seen states, first off, direct their boards of education to review age-appropriate health standards and introduce concepts that address, mental health, emotional health, and social health. States are beginning to outline procedures for schools to provide school-based behavioral health referrals for their students. And in one of the more unique ones, we saw Maine, Colorado, and Virginia this year pass legislation that allows students to take excused absences from school for mental health or behavioral health reasons so that they can use mental health days essentially throughout the year. Another key area is just raising awareness and providing support both around mental and behavioral health as well as around suicide awareness and suicide prevention. So we've seen a number of states introduce that directly into student curriculums. We've seen states introduce that into the training and support for their counselors and their staff, teachers generally. We've also seen states requiring more teacher training again and more professional development on suicide awareness, trauma-informed care, and just a number of other efforts to raise awareness across schools holistically. And the final issue area there we identified relates to providing health services. This is one that was heavily driven by the pandemic, and we anticipate we'll see a lot more of this in 2021 as well. So we saw a number of states introduce telehealth delivery methods and okay that so that schools and districts can provide that to their students. We've also seen a number of states examining vaccination requirements for students. In particular, Connecticut's a state to pull out where there are currently 3 pending bills that have kind of taken different approaches to vaccination. So there's one bill currently that would introduce exemptions for religious or other claims. There's another bill that would eliminate all exemptions that are non-medical. And there's another bill that would require a study on students who have claimed a religious exemption and introducing contact tracing on those students to see if they can identify any potential spread of COVID or just to pull any data there from those exemptions. So yeah, in 2021, I think we'll anticipate seeing more of those. I think we've already seen a number of new ones introduced early this year. We don't have a count for that yet since it's so early in the year. We don't have a comprehensive one, but that's definitely an area we can provide more information as the year goes on. And the last issue area we identified is high school, looking at different high school issue areas. So, we've seen in recent years, that high school graduation is often assumed to signify readiness, college readiness. But recent federal data indicates that 68% of entering students at community colleges and 40% of students entering at public four-year colleges take at least one developmental course. So state policymakers are approaching that by seeking to support high school to college transitions through introductions of early credit opportunities and primarily around dual or concurrent enrollment. So to back up, 417 bills there related to high school. 62 of those were enacted or vetoed, and of those 62, 23 were directly related to the pandemic. So the main thread here is that states are looking at how to ensure equitable access to dual enrollment courses. And we've seen that in kind of 2 key policy areas. Number 1, reducing costs and barriers for students, or number 2, expanding student eligibility generally. So for that first one, an example of this, we saw a bill in California where a participating high school student can now submit a single parental consent form and a recommendation from their principal and a single application, which will remain valid for the entirety of their enrollment in dual enrollment courses rather than having to resubmit paperwork every year, just to remove a barrier and to make it more accessible to students. Next up, we looked at expanding dual and enrollment eligibility more broadly. So we've seen some states that have reduced test scores as a barrier. We've seen some states increase funding to support more equitable access to early credit opportunities. And finally, we've seen a higher focus on competency-based education. So specific to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen an increased interest in competency-based learning or personalized learning. And we do anticipate that'll carry over through 2021 as well. Some examples of what we've seen so far: we've seen some states shift graduation requirements that allow for credit based on work opportunities or project-based capstones, shifting away from a reliance on seat time to provide a more flexible approach based on student learning, and hopefully to reduce those courses needed entering college. So yeah, I understand that was a whirlwind, lots of numbers, lots of issues. So just wanted to be respectful of time, but we also want to open it up to Q&A now if anyone has anything. If not, again, we're happy to follow up with you this week or throughout the 2021 legislative session.
Thank you, Zeke. Anybody have any questions? I see Marilyn Dondero, Vice Chair Luke.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's really not a question. It's just a huge hearty thank you to both of our presenters, Mr. Moore and Mr. Perez. ECS is an invaluable resource, and I totally appreciate all you've done over the years for me, and I know for the rest of our legislators in Nevada. So thank you very much, and it's good to see both of you.
Yes, thank you. I second that. Great resource you are. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. We will now go, we will now open the hearing.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Hardy. Sorry.
So I'm raising my hand in the chat or on the other one, and then I wave, but I don't know which one is you like the best.
Actually, either one. I was trying to look for it, but I guess you didn't show up on there, so that's all right. Go ahead. And if I don't, we're small enough that if I don't catch it, just do like you did. Just get on there and just say, Mr. Chair, and I'll recognize you.
So the burning question that I have is, how do I get teachers back in the classroom and my students back to school? And that's the burning question that I have for Clark County. I mean, you know, we're talking about lots of different things, but that's the answer that I'm looking for.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had a number of questions throughout from different states and different state leaders looking at either through legislation, right, or through state guidance at the board level or at the state level. So we do have some of that already prepared. We'd be happy to send that your way. Don't know that I can sum it up in a silver bullet answer here, but lots of different approaches states have taken that we'd be happy to pass on to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Let me see. I gotta be able to view everybody. Am I missing anybody? I don't see anybody else wanting to ask any questions. So thank you very much. Great resource. So you can always go out, and we've got their contacts, and there's plenty of other folks there at ECS that also have helped us out, and so thank you very much. All right. So now we're going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 36, which will be presented. I believe our Superintendent of Public Instruction, Joan Ebert, will at least begin or make the presentation. And I know she's got staff and others available also to answer questions.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. So good afternoon, Chair Dennis, Vice Chair Dondero Luke, members of the Committee on Education. For the record, my name is Joan Ebert. I'm the State Superintendent.
Excuse me, Superintendent Ebert. Hi, this is Kim in broadcast. Your volume is really low. If you could move a little closer to the mic, that would be wonderful.
Is that better?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Great. So for the record, my name is Joan Ebert. I'm the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. We're excited to be here for the 81st session and your first meeting, so thank you. This bill was pre-filed by Governor Sisolak on behalf of the Department of Education, but this bill was truly filed on behalf of our partners in public health and safety who identified a gap in services, and our school district committees who create the crisis, emergency, or suicide response plans. We also want to make sure that during this pandemic is one of the things that we went to immediately of all of our requirements during this pandemic and noted that an epidemic was not identified in there. We know all the reasons why. Thank goodness it's only every 100 years. That being said, in section 1, we are adding in section 1, we would like to amend and have at least one representative of the county or district board of health to the development committee, which develops the plan used by public schools to respond to crisis, emergency, or suicide. And then in section 2, expands the definition of an outbreak of a disease to include an epidemic. Those are the 2 areas that have been identified by the Department of Education. Thank you very much for having us here today, and we'll stand ready to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Yes. Let's see. Senator Hammond, I think I saw you raise your hand. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A real quick, brief understanding of the difference between a pandemic and epidemic, just so I understand why we put the 2 words in there, if you could, please.
Thank you. For the record, Superintendent Ebert, pandemic is worldwide. Epidemic is confined, to a specific area.
Very good. I just want to make sure we got that on the record because we've been talking about it this morning, just a few of us talking about that. I wanted to make sure I understood the difference. Thank you.
Yes, Senator Lane.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, to and through to the Department of Education. So in section 1, where it says the Board of Trustees of each school district shall establish a development committee to develop one plan. To me, a development committee has something to do with money, and basically what you're doing is creating a crisis committee that's going to develop a plan. So I'm wondering if we couldn't clean that language up and make it a little more concise. Because it seems redundant. I would keep repeating the same terms. And I think what we're trying to do is establish a crisis committee that's going to come up with a plan for the school. So to me, it would seem like it would be easier if we say the Board of Trustees of each school district shall establish a crisis committee to develop one plan, and then do the rest. And then I think when you talk about charter schools, it's the same situation.
Thank you, Superintendent Ebert. For the record, that does appear to create clarity in this section. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, I have to switch back. I'm not seeing any. I have one question, or just one suggestion, because I normally catch this when we did this, because this bill got passed last time. So even that last comment was really something that probably should have caught last time, but this is the opportunity. In section 1, let's see, where is it? Line 22, section 1, E, where it talks about parent or legal guardian. I usually try to catch this, but actually I was having a discussion with Nevada PTA, of which I have a history in the past with. Generally, we've always tried, whenever in legislation, when there's a parent, to try to get a parent that's not an employee of the school district, or so not a teacher, not a so I would be interested in seeing if we could clean that up to say a parent, or as we have in the past, a parent or legal guardian that's not an employee of the school district. And that gives a little bit of a different perspective when you're asking a parent who works for someone. And I think it's a little harder. I know sometimes it's harder to find parents, but I think it gives a perspective that's really important. But I don't know if you've had any comments or anything as you've gone through this process.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. For the record, Superintendent Ebert, that does seem like a very friendly amendment. And as you noted, it does allow a different perspective to this group. and they also can be inclusive and are inclusive of people that are in the education system as well. So yes.
Thank you. Senator Buck.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. I was just wondering in section 1, line 5, why it says public schools other than the charter schools in the school district and why they're not involved.
Mr. Chair, this is Asher Killian, Committee Counsel. I could address that if you would like.
Yes, Mr. Killian, would you please?
Sure. So that's a drafting construction to differentiate between the Board of Trustees of the school district developing the plan for the traditional schools, and then the governing body of the charter schools later in that paragraph is responsible for developing the plan that would apply to the charter schools. So since they're both public schools, but they're different kinds of public schools that have different governing institutions, we had to bifurcate that so that they were each appropriately provided for.
Great. And that also addresses the issue that there's charter schools that are under a school district versus the charter school authority, right?
Mr. Chair, Asher Killian, Committee Counsel, that's correct. For a charter school whose sponsor is the school district, that school district would then be the governing body of that charter school.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, other questions, concerns? Yeah, Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think along that line, the point being, do we have a charter school specifically other than just or? Should there not be an and in some of that? I mean, that's one of the things. But my other question is real basic, is existing law requires that we do this. Have we not done it yet?
Mr. Killian, you want to address the and?
Sure, Mr. Chair, Asher Killian, Committee Counsel. So the way that the language of this section is constructed, it's essentially two parallel tracks that are the same. So any public school that is not a charter school would follow the track where the Board of Trustees is responsible for this. And any public school that is a charter school would follow the track where its governing body is responsible for this. It's the same requirements. It's just a different entity that's responsible for executing them.
Thank you.
So that gets me to the question, is this existing now like it says in our Legislative Council Digest?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask the department if they would address that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Superintendent Ebert, all school districts and charter schools have completed their annual requirements for these plans. They have been turned in, and so these changes would be for plans going.
Thank you. All right, I think I saw Senator Buck. Was that you that had your hand up? No? Senator Lang? No?
Thank you. My question was just answered.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions? Great, okay, so, all right, so here we go. Here we go. We hope this part works now. We're now going to take testimony in support of Senate Bill 36. Let me explain. We'll do support, then we'll do opposition, and then we'll do neutral. And for neutral, I just want to define what neutral is. Neutral means that you're not in support of it and you're not opposing it. But usually, most people that are neutral are going to be like an agency or somebody that just wants to give a comment on the bill, but they're not going to vote in support or against. So what I don't want is somebody that says, well, I really like it a lot, but I don't like this part and this part, so I'm neutral. But so in other words, you don't like it, so just vote in opposition. If you really like it, so just so we're clear. So with that, and then we're also, as I mentioned before, you're limited to 2 minutes. And in addition, you're also have the ability to submit anything in writing that you'd like to make sure that's included in the record for us to see. So with that, let's, I'm going to ask VPS to, if we could open up the lines for those that are in support.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on SB 36, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
And for our staff, it takes a little bit before we can, right? Doesn't it take a minute or so to make sure that we can get somebody on?
Caller with the last 3 digits of 689, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Tom, T-O-M, Dunn, D-U-N-N, District Vice President for the Professional Firefighters of Nevada. The Professional Firefighters of Nevada is in support of this bill as it brings public health to the table of emergency management at the school district level. We also believe that this directly addresses the current pandemic we are dealing with and will lead to good policy in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 927, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Hello, my name is Hava, H-A-W-A-H, Ahmed, A-H-M-A-D, and I represent the Clark County Education Association. The Clark County Education Association represents more than 18,000 licensed professionals in Clark County School District. We are the largest independent teachers union in the country and in the state of Nevada. We engage in bipartisan advocacy for advancing public education in Nevada. In Clark County School District, there are currently 1,840 mental health professionals on the front lines supporting our 350,000 students. These professionals must be prepared to handle difficult situations that arise, but the pandemic has underscored our public school delivery system's lack of responsiveness. That is why district leaders, representatives from the health department, educators, and parents must work together to be able to respond to emergencies, crises, suicides, and epidemics. The Clark County School District has experienced a mental health crisis since the beginning of the school closures that have resulted in a high number of student suicides. Educators, administrators, and students need a plan to help prepare and risk manage all future crises, emergencies, and epidemics as we return to in-person and hybridized learning to support the mental and behavioral health of all individuals in the education realm. CCEA supports the creation of risk management mechanisms to support our educators and students through these difficult times, and SB 36 is a crucial step. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 079, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Joelle Gutman Dodson, Joelle-Gutman-Dodson. Can I go now? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. For the record, this is Joelle Gutman Dodson representing the Washoe County Health District. And we're in support of this bill. We're very pleased to be included in SB 36. We believe our emergency management division can help provide emergency response and planning and public health expertise. We also think it'll serve the community well to have a coordinated emergency response. We are asking for one friendly amendment that we have discussed with the Department of Education. We're asking for a little more clarity as to who the representative of the District Board of Health can be. We'd like it to be more permissible that a qualified designee of the District Board of Health could be a member of the Development Committee. And that can be however the LCB determines the language would be appropriate, but we are in support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 200, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 200, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Okay, I was muted actually on the thing. So again, Bradley Mayer, BradleyMayer of Argenta Partners for the record, here today testifying on behalf of the Southern Nevada Health District. We are in support, and just to echo what Joelle's comments were, we've been in communication with representatives of the Department of Ed, have expressed, a preference for some clarifying language that provides flexibility for the representative in this committee to not necessarily be restricted to an actual member of the Board of Health, but could include any representative designated by the board, such as a subject matter expert from the health district staff. And so the Department of Ed has confirmed the willingness to kind of accept this friendly amendment to this effect. And so we'll be submitting that. And I'll just close by thanking them for bringing this forward and working with us to get here. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits of 692, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
All right, thank you. My name is Mary Przinski, MaryPierczynski, and I'm here representing the Nevada Association of School Superintendents. And we want to thank you, Senator Dennis, and all the committee members for once again stepping up to the plate and supporting our students throughout the state and serving on this very, very important committee again. The Nevada Association of School Superintendents, which is composed of all the 17 districts in the state, is in strong support of SB 36. Safety and concerns about our children in school safely and healthy is very important to all of us, and so we are in support. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to hear from you, Mary.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Okay, so we will now go to those who wish to give testimony in opposition. Those in opposition?
To testify in opposition on SB 36, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Okay, thank you. We will now go to testimony in neutral.
To testify in neutral on SB 36, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so hearing no one else, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing on SB 36. And now we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 83, and I am going to pass the gavel to Vice Chair Dondero Loop, since I will be presenting this bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 83.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Madam Chair, and the members of the committee. For the record, I am Senator Mo Dennis, representing Senate District 2 in Clark County. I am presenting Senate Bill 83, which revises provisions relating to certain assessments The bill before you today comes as a recommendation from the Interim Legislative Committee on Education, of which I serve as the vice chair. Had served as a vice chair. I would like to first begin with some brief background information that explains what led to this recommendation. Due to the shift to remote learning resulting from the coronavirus disease of 2019, COVID-19 pandemic, on March 20th, 2020, the United States Department of Education announced it would allow states to submit a waiver from federally mandated testing and other requirements for the school year 2019-2020. On the same day, Nevada's Department of Education announced it had submitted the waiver request to the U.S. Department of Education, and it was later approved. It's important to note that in September, that was March, and then in September, the U.S. Secretary of Education indicated no additional waivers would be granted to states for fiscal year 2020-2021. While the current administration has not yet given additional guidance in this regard, SB 83 would allow NDE to take action if the U.S. Department of Education allows for such a waiver or pause for school year 2020-2021. So the summary, Senate Bill 83 authorizes NDE to temporarily waive or pause the requirement to administer federally required examinations that measure the achievement and proficiency of pupils if the U.S. Department of Education allows for such a waiver or pause. The bill also makes conforming changes to other statutes related to the temporary waiver or pause to administer such assessment. After reaching out to relevant stakeholders, Nevada Department of Education indicated to our staff it would like to propose an amendment to further clarify certain reporting responsibilities if the waiver were to be granted as proposed in the bill. And I will defer to the department to discuss the intent of the amendment and answer any questions you might have. So Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee, this concludes my presentation. As you can tell, this is a bill to give permission, but doesn't mean that we would necessarily do it because it would depend on whether we would even be allowed to do that. But currently, in the situation that we're in, this would make it so that at least we have the opportunity to make the request to the Department of the U.S. Department of Education, and I think that the proposed amendment will also address an issue that we have in the state. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I think probably we should hear the amendment and then go to the questions, if that's okay, Madam Vice Chair.
That is fine. I believe the amendment is sponsored by the Department of Ed. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay, go ahead when you're ready. Ms. Dick, are you going to present this?
Madam Vice Chair, Dr. Jonathan Moore from the Nevada Department of Education. Thank you. Thank you also to Senator Dennis for hearing the amendment as well. The Department of Education proposes to add language similar to waiving or temporarily pausing the completion of the annual report of accountability in the event that the administration of assessments has also been waived or temporarily paused. That concludes the amendment.
Thank you very much. And I'm assuming, Chair Dennis, that this is a friendly amendment.
It is. It's like the other half of it allows the state to also pause the assessment on our side, because we don't have that either. So this would clarify both those, the national waiver and then the state waiver.
Thank you very much. So members, are there questions?
Question? Yes, I have a question.
Sorry, Senator Hammond, I was searching for your hand. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, just a quick question. I just want to make sure we're not doing anything different than already took place. All we're doing is anticipating, and there's got to be triggers that happen before we actually take advantage of the ability to waive these requirements. And I would add to that, probably for the record, that I don't mean to take advantage. I mean, These are extraordinary circumstances, extenuating circumstances in this case, in last year's case as well. But there's a trigger that happens before we actually are allowed to waive the assessment and then waive the accountability measures that would then be associated with the assessment. Am I correct in that assumption in putting that on the record?
Madam Chair, this is Senator Dennis. Yeah, so what happened last year was done in an emergency. So this would allow so that that emergency doesn't have to, we didn't have to go through that process that the governor had to go through. But yes, you're correct that you still have to meet all the other parts of that in order to be able to do this. And the department may have some additional information in that respect, but that's the reason that we brought this bill forward, to allow us to actually do that, what actually happened last year, but make it so that we could be more timely.
Okay. Yeah, it's sort of an escape clause in preparation for another event like that.
Thank you very much. Senator Buck.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Loop. I was wondering for how long, or is this then going to the following year, or what's put in place for that?
This is Senator Dennis, and Mr. Killian can correct me, but I believe this would be in there so that for any emergency situation in the future, we would still be able to use it. But he can correct me if I'm wrong in that respect. That was my understanding.
And thank you, Madam Vice Chair, Asher Killian, Committee Counsel. That's correct. The way that this bill would work effectively, the state waiver is tied to the federal waiver. So long as the federal waiver were active, the state waiver would be active to the same duration.
Thank you. Additional questions? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you very much for that presentation. And we will go to testimony in support of Senate Bill 83. If you are in support, we'll pause just a minute for everybody to get in the queue, and we'll go ahead when broadcasting's ready.
Thank you, Vice Chair. To testify in support of SB 83, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 927, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Hello, my name is Hava Ahmed, and I represent the Clark County Education Association. That's Hava, H-A-W-A-H, Ahmed, A-H-M-A-D. The Clark County Education Association represents more than 18,000 licensed professionals in Clark County School District. We are the largest independent teachers union in the country and in the state of Nevada. We engage in bipartisan advocacy for advancing public education in Nevada. Students across Nevada have experienced distance education for nearly a full year, and many of these students have experienced inconsistent engagement in learning. Nevada must be responsive to the needs of Nevada students to minimize the impact of educational inequities that have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. A pause or waiver of standardized testing in accordance with federal guidelines may help our educators put students' skill development at the forefront of their education to ensure that every student has an opportunity to enter the workforce or to continue their education. Additionally, with the ability to waive or pause certain examinations and assessments, the State Department of Education can help educators prioritize the needs of their students without being bound in measurements of achievement and proficiency as prescribed by pre-pandemic times. CCEA supports the work of this committee moving forward with legislation responsive to the pandemic and are vehement supporters of ensuring that we do everything in our power to ensure students are given opportunities to succeed. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 309, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
My name is Brian Rippett, B-R-I-A-N, R-I-P-P-E-T. Thank you, Chair Dennis and the committee. As stated before, I'm Brian Rippett. I'm a science teacher of 21 years in Douglas County, currently on leave serving as president of the Nevada State Education Association, and I'm speaking in support of Senate Bill 83. As we know, the pandemic has affected everything, including the education community. And during this time, students have each experienced their own difficulties and its sometimes successes. And they're going to need a caring professional to welcome and guide them as we transition back to what both Senator Hardy and I agree is more desirable, full-time in-person learning. The professional teachers in the classroom need trust, support, and time to evaluate and plan for the success of their students. Spring is on its way, and that has become known as testing season in many schools. Testing season consumes weeks of class time. The tests are scanned by machines out of state. They report vague results, and it's often many months after the fact. This is hardly what our kids need at this time. I ask that you support Senate Bill 83 as our kids and teachers need this time to connect and learn. I urge that we trust the teachers who are licensed to do this work. You will not be disappointed. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last three digits of 577, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Chris Daly, CHRMSDALY, Nevada State Education Association. NSEA represents a majority of educators across the state with members in every Nevada school district, including teachers, other licensed education professionals, and education support professionals who provide vital services to students in Nevada's public education system. NSEA's 120-year history. There have been few more challenging times than the one we find ourselves in right now with the COVID-19 pandemic. We appreciate the work of this committee and the legislature during this time of crisis. NSEA wholeheartedly supports SB 83 authorizing the Department of Education to temporarily waive or pause mandated student assessments. Over-testing has been a long-standing concern of classroom educators as decades of standardized tests have shifted the focus in education away from student learning toward a culture of high-stakes testing. Over the last two sessions, NSEA worked with this committee to reduce the burden of standardized testing on our students and educators. This included helping to pass a 2017 bill from former Senator Woodhouse to audit and streamline the amount of time and resources spent on state tests. While small changes have been made over the last several years, the current crisis calls for a more substantive overhaul of state testing requirements. NSEA has consistently expressed their concern that existing policy on student assessments, teacher evaluations, and school star ratings compromise the safe operation of schools during the COVID-19 crisis. These mechanisms have failed to foster the improvements in either achievement or student engagement they were intended to deliver. With a continued reliance on these old schemes, students and educators have counter incentives to come to school when sick, to teach to test instead of teaching and reinforcing health and safety, and to maximize numbers and time in classrooms, even when that may be outside of health and safety guidelines. Further, drastic improvement in testing results during this most difficult school year, like the MAP reading results presented to the State Board of Education during their November meeting, highlight just how ridiculous it is to conduct these tests during a pandemic. This school year, educators across the state have responded in a diversity of ways depending on their district and the status of the COVID-19 crisis in their communities. Some are back at their school buildings offering in-person instruction. Others are working in hybrid models, juggling in-person learning with distance learning opportunities. Many others, including in Clark County, are working to create meaningful education experiences through full distance learning, with districts tailoring their response to meet the unique challenges they face in their own communities. The state's one-size-fits-all approach to standardized tests misses the mark of this moment. Suspension of elaborate sorting and rating mechanisms, including federal, state, and district mandated assessments, is the smart thing to do. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits of 692, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Thank you. My name is Mary Pruszinski, MaryPierczynski, representing the Nevada Association of School Superintendents. And thank you, Vice Chair Don Darrell Loop and members of the committee for allowing us to support this bill, SB 83, we see it as a common sense approach to dealing with this period of time. We know that many students have been challenged with the distance education approach our state was forced to undertake. So we do support the bill. Thank you.
Vice Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to testimony in opposition.
To testify in opposition on SB 83, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Vice Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Then can we go ahead and go on to neutral? Thank you.
To testify in neutral on SB 83, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Vice Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. Hearing no one else, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 83, and I will pass the gavel back to the chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. One comment that I forgot to mention in my comment, this is a timely issue. So, I mean, this is the thing that would get done upon passage, and that's why we're doing this early. So my question to the committee is your pleasure as far as the bill. We could take this up today so that we can move it along and get it over to the assembly so that it could get passed quicker, or we could put it off to a different day. Just wanted to get your feel for where you're at on it.
If it would please the chairman, I actually would move that we pass it as amended. If there was an amendment, I can't remember now. I think it was the other one that was amended. So
yes, it would be amended. It would be an amended do pass.
Right, amended. I would amend and do pass so we can pass it along, but we'll defer to the rest of them if we get a second.
I would second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend and do pass, and a second from, I think it was Senator Lang. There was a couple of you there. You look the same. So we have a motion to amend and do pass and a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion? If not, then I will ask the secretary to take a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Starting with Vice Chair Dondera-Lupe.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Hammond.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Yes.
Senator Buck.
Yes.
Chair Dennis.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we will now open up time for public comment. Will the broadcast production staff please add the first caller with public comment to the meeting?
Chair, the public line is open and working, and there are no callers at this time.
Do we need to pause to give people a chance, or have they already had that opportunity?
If you want to do a pause, we can.
Let's just do a pause here for just a second. I want to make sure that anyone that wants to speak has that opportunity. I know with the technology, sometimes it can get a little frustrating when you're trying to find that link or trying to find the number. The one comment that I will make, I would hope that people can appreciate the fact that, at least I feel that actually we're actually have more opportunities for people in this session than we've ever had before. Before you had to go down to a building and if you couldn't be here in person in Carson City, which is very difficult for those from Las Vegas, they could go to the Grant Sawyer building, but they still had to go there. Now they could actually be at home and make comments. And so I hope that's appreciated by those that will have opportunities to give comment as we go throughout the session this time. So let's see. Okay, and while we're one thing more while we're waiting, let's see. Let's pick on one of our new people. Senator Lang, would you do the floor statement on this bill?
I'm sorry, on which bill?
On the one that we just passed. When it comes to the floor, would you do the floor statement? They'll have it typed up for you, but
sure.
I want to give you I'm going to give everybody an opportunity, but I thought I'd give you the first one.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let me check so staff how are we on? Is there any additional people called in to give public comment?
Chair, the public line is open and working, and there are no callers at this time.
Great, thank you very much. So I will go ahead and close public comment for the meeting. Are there any comments from the members? Any additional comments? Anything that we missed that you'd like to share with us at this point? If not, we will not. While the schedule says we meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we're not meeting this Friday. Probably the first few Fridays for sure, until we get more bills and things in. So our next meeting will be on Monday. With that, I have no further items to come before us at this time. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you to staff and everyone for we got through it and everybody got through. So thank you very much.